everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and season 4 of the indie show. We are kicking it off tonight with a little bit of Killadelphia. We are talking volume 2, and I got my Black Hammer crew that has also become my Killadelphia crew for this tonight. We got my man Daryl. What is going on?
What's happening? Ready to talk some vampires and werewolves.
There you go. We're going to talk some vampires and werewolves. We got the reason that we are 9:35 starting. We got Justin. No good comment.
Speaking of werewolves and vampires.
Oh well, never mind. Get that out of here. And then we got my man John.
I love you. Oh, sorry. I was talking to my lady.
Killadelphia fan that I know for sure. So
mostly just because of her. Just because of her right there. Abigail for the win.
So we're gonna leave Justin in the green room. Think about what he did, putting that on my channel. That's not allowed.
Scandalous.
That is not allowed. Have you thought better?
I was trying to insult the guy because he said werewolves and vampires. That was an insult, but it kind of
He's not allowed to appear on my channel.
Not as creepy as what John was just doing. I don't know.
No, all right, we had GT Key in here tailgating like 4 hours ago because nice. Justin's late. And really, what's going on? Sleepy Steppin' Razor, what is going on?
Nice.
Favorite series in a long time. Nice. Gore Vidal. Always good to have Gore here. Cross for Boy Gaming. There you go. Crossover Boy Gaming. There you go. I can't speak, but hey, welcome. So, volume 2 of Killadephia. Thoughts. Daryl, we'll let you go first, man. What did you think of volume 2 here, just in general?
I liked a lot of the development of where it was going. It kind of engaged me more than the last one to a degree. Some things I'm kind of like, this kind of negates some stuff from the first one that was pretty impactful, but overall, pretty good.
Okay. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but okay. Justin, what did you think of volume 2?
So, I mean, I'll lead with the artwork. That definitely still continues to get me reading throughout this series. I absolutely love the panel layouts, the overall the color schemes they use, and overall, I mean, it definitely gives you the horror vibes, the blood and everything else. I'm all for it. And yeah, I see Daryl kind of some of the things you mentioned. I see it even much more so. This is technically like my third time through with this one, but yeah. So overall, I do really enjoy the series though. So I kind of forgot that how it ended the way it ended, and obviously there's more in volume 3, but we'll get to that at some point. But yeah, overall, really liked it.
John, what did you think about volume 2?
I'm a big Abigail Adams fan, and she is getting a ton of, I won't say page time here, and I think really the book is better for it, in my opinion. I like the way they utilize her a ton in this particular set of 6 issues. She's a great villainess, and I love the covers when they're utilizing her more. I got the J. Scott Campbell issue, whatever it is, 10. That's like, I don't even like J. Scott Campbell, but he's drawing Abigail Adams. I'm going to buy that. And then I love this is the most bizarre Gothic, I think, section. You talk about the underworld. Yeah, there it is right there. Yeah, there's that J. Scott.
Yeah, it's a great one.
The underworld, you get the afterlife and the river Styx, you get like Satan, and you get like, it's just, we're going way beyond just like, hey, there's vampires in Philadelphia, to like, no, there's an entire universe of supernatural going on here. And I yes, she is absolutely. And I like the way that they expand on those things. So I can't wait to talk about issue 8. Honestly, that's the one.
Okay. So, a reminder for anyone watching that horror is always a high lift for me. I am not a huge horror guy. It has to usually be, there has to be more to it than just horror in order to keep me engaged. Because if it's just violence and scary monsters, that doesn't do much for me. this didn't turn me off to the series, but I did feel a step back because I, like Daryl, felt like they undid some of the stuff that happened in the first series, and they didn't necessarily give good justification in my mind for why they undid a couple of things. Mainly the big thing at the end, like there was no explanation of why Tevin's doing that and why that character, and we'll get to it in a minute, spoilers, would have any reason to be any different than they were before. And like, and then a couple of the other things that bothered me a little bit, there was a little bit of lack of motivation or inconsistent motivation, I felt like, for a couple of the characters through this, like in what they were doing. So I still like the premise. I do feel like the premise gives it more than just your average vampire story. But I did feel like this volume was just very inconsistent in how well it used it. And like at times it felt like it was even undoing itself. I don't know. I didn't feel like it worked as well for me overall. Like there were moments that were really good, and then there were moments that was like, what? So I don't know. We'll get into it. Maybe I'll feel differently as we talk about it. But that's, yeah, my initial, having read it last night, I was like, I was not as happy with this volume as I was with the first volume. So that's just me. So let's dig in. And so we pick up at the end of volume 7, and basically we see that Sun has, after the events of volume 1, has decided to stay in Philadelphia and be a detective there instead of going back to his detective job in Baltimore, I think is where he was at before. And my first question is, why, knowing what was going on in the city on Earth, would you not go home? I mean,
like, run, get out of there.
Yeah, literally, like,
go to an island.
Why would you just go home? Obviously, he feels the obligation to keep fighting a good fight because he knows they're not all gone. Right. But what did you think about the setup to see that he was trying to just like completely pick up his dad's shoes? Like, I felt like that was a little inconsistent with where they left each other at the end of the volume. Like, that he's like, they forgave each other, but the fact that he decided not to go back to his life and instead sort of just take over his dad's life in Philadelphia. Justin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just like really just this obligation for him, especially after they kind of, hammered things out or smoothed things over. I think might have played a little bit more of a role. But on top of that, I mean, he's in a relationship now with Josie, and just the stuff he knows. I think that for some, it would be more intriguing knowing now the truth of what's going on, that there are such beasts, or in this case, vampires that exist, and being on the side of just being in the know about it, him being a little bit more intrigued in that way. But ultimately, yeah, kind of feeling like he has this obligation, like, okay, like gotta take up, where my dad left off, especially now we're on good terms now. I think that was like a big part of it, just them kind of finishing off the way that they did in the last season. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some parts where, you see that he's not fit for it, or there's answers that he's not aware of and doesn't know how to handle certain situations. And he makes some big mistakes in certain, parts of this book here that we'll get into. So, he's definitely not prepared in that way that he, I think, thought he was.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
John, what about you? What do you think of the choice that he decided to stay?
I think one of the ongoing, I don't want to say themes, but one of the ongoing concepts or repetitive concepts in this series is how characters struggle to overcome their baggage, and it's just ongoing, and now he still feels like he's got to prove something to his dad. He still feels like he's got to do better and take over, and he feels this weight of responsibility. And I think it's true of all of them. And certainly the Jupiter, we could talk about the Jupiter character who's prominent in this first issue, but talk about somebody who can't get past their baggage, and understandably so, is just absolutely consumed by it. And a lot of them, we saw it in the previous volume, John Adams cannot get over his baggage. And I think that's an ongoing weight he's carrying. So can people change? Can they move beyond their the trauma in their lives or the whatever emotional strain they have in their lives? Can they move on? I think in this universe in particular, I think the writer is saying it's super rare, super challenging, and does not happen often.
No. Daryl, what about you? What do you think?
Well, he does have a woman there.
Yeah.
He's staying for the poon.
Yeah. I mean,
you know?
they hit it off so quickly. I mean, why not
Good.
stick around for that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I didn't really put much thought into that about why he was staying, other than just like, I mean, he's a vampire hunter now, and this is where the vampires are. That's kind of where the story needs to go. So I didn't give that a whole lot of thought, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, he's still hung up on his dad, though, like even early on. That's where I'm starting, like, okay, now I feel like we're doing a redux of the first volume. It's like I thought that chapter kind of closed, but now it's like we're still hanging on to that. I mean, it's like John was saying, I guess that's just like his baggage he can't let go of. Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel like, and that sets up to me a lot of even his talking about the way as he's sitting here at the very beginning, his dad and stuff. It sets up the fact that I feel like we do retread a lot of ground with him and his dad as we go through this particular volume.
Mm-hmm.
But the next part of the issue is we see Abigail in charge now of what remains of the vampires, and we get our first of many little mini flashbacks in this volume. Some of these, I think, are some of the best parts that work some of the best in this whole volume. And we meet Jupiter for the first time. So, Daryl, what did you think of your introduction to Jupiter here?
I like the introduction of the Jupiter character. I thought it was interesting to weave in this story about Thomas Jefferson. Obviously, as we get a little later, I know of a real life one. But was this slave known as like a real slave that Jefferson owned that existed?
I don't know.
Later on, we get to one that was
Right.
But so I didn't know if this was like, I mean, this like whole like childhood friend thing. I was like, did this really happen? So I'm unaware of that. But I like the history of Thomas Jefferson. I find him a really intriguing one. So I liked all this part. The stuff with Abigail, of course, is good. I do like the Abigail character a lot. I'm still unclear how Toppy lived in the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously pretty scarred from it, but it's like he was left for dead and the sun was coming up. It never really showed how he survived exactly.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like, whatever. I guess he's still alive, and we get to explore him a little more later. But
as we go through this, maybe it's impossible to kill these things. I mean, it's like a little bit like, yeah.
But Jupiter was pretty interesting. I like the introduction of the aspect of him as used like just kind of like a blunt force weapon, even though they're all weapons themselves, but he's like extra savage.
Right. And she's clearly using him sort of still as a tool and a weapon, which we'll get into later as this goes through. Justin, what do you think about the introduction to Jupiter?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I mean, I definitely like the way that they utilize the flashbacks here throughout the series, and just give more of a glance to what life was like even for them before they really got into being the full-on vampires and the way they are now. So yeah, and as Daryl mentioned, just the tie into Thomas Jefferson at that time, what else was going on, because we did already have like some minor hints before. So just seeing another character's kind of viewpoint of certain things of that time, I think makes it even more interesting. And just immediately curious to see kind of where it goes as she turns him essentially.
Yeah. So, John, do you have anything more? You touched on Jupiter a little bit. Do you have anything more?
I think you guys definitely hit it on the head. I think it's interesting seeing his perspective on slavery. Obviously, he's going to be very different than the Jeffersonian perspective. And I think as the series goes on, our understanding of Jefferson he's an easy guy to demonize. He's an easy guy to glorify. And I think he has these kind of like dichotomous, these opposing perspectives on who he was, because obviously as a significant founding father, writer of the Declaration of Independence, and our third president, and all these things that are like hugely important. and at the same time, like, owned a ton of slaves and had kids with slaves, and definitely, that was definitely not consensual. No matter what people want to tell you, there's no way you can have sex with a piece of property and consider them to give you consent in any way. So there's definitely a lot of like interesting contradictions that I think the series wants to bring up, and Jupiter is a fascinating way to dive into that, because he is really like the bleeding wound of slavery brought forth, right? He can't get past it. He puts the mask back on again by choice. Like, he can't let go of it. There's some really, it's almost like that moment of him putting the mask back on is way creepier than any of the violence that we see him display throughout the sequence. He is the most violent character we've had, but something about him choosing to put these instruments of slavery back on is almost scarier.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well, it looks like, yes, Jupiter was actually Jefferson's personal slave and later became his coachman when he was a young man. So an actual person.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So next we get a brief moment of, we see Josie and Junior debating for themselves. What are we doing? But after that brief moment, unless you guys have anything there, we go back to kind of Toppy challenging Abigail, like, what are we doing here? Like, do you have a plan? What is it? Like, and I do feel like, as we'll go through this volume, John talks about how she's a good villainess, and like, her portrayal is very well done, except for the fact that I do feel like there's a lack of a cohesive plan of what she's actually trying to accomplish through this volume. And we'll talk about it as we get to some of the moments, but it's like, because she tells him, like, they're going to set some demonstrations, and eventually they want to, like, have them, like, make the humans their slaves and stuff. But then at the end, she's like, just burn it all down. And it's, there's a little inconsistency, I think, to her and what it is her goals are. But, like, in terms of just presence, she is excellent here. And then her initial plan to set Jupiter loose to send a message clearly is, as violent as, you can.
That splash page is nuts.
Yeah. And as she sets him on the governor, what did you think of Abigail's initial movements and setting Jupiter loose? I'm going to let John go first because he is the Abigail fan here. What do you think of her, like, where she's trying to lead things here?
Rodney Barnes has said that the Killadelphia as a book struggles to have a female perspective, and that often it's very male-driven fathers and sons and founding fathers, and women are often given, much like history books, the second-class status.
Right.
And I think ultimately that's the drive. That's the baggage Abigail has,
yes.
And I think it's perfect that he struggled. He even said, like, it's hard to find the strong female characters and the strong female voices in my story, because a lot of it's based on fathers and sons and founding fathers, and there's not necessarily a place for the female characters. Abigail is the one exception, and I think that's why I like her, and I think that's the note that she gets to play that's different than anybody else's. And I think it's I enjoy her baggage, because as a character from history, I didn't learn much about Abigail Adams as a kid growing up. I've learned a lot more as a third grade teacher when I was teaching my students about America's history and this amazing relationship that she had with John, and how very different it was from any of the other founding fathers and their wives. I really liked the incredible intelligence and things that Abigail did that were way ahead of their time. And it's nice that's used here in some way as like her baggage, which is that she could have done so much more in a world that would have maybe put her on the same footing as her husband.
Right. Daryl, what do you think of her initial setting of Jupiter loose here and her initial plan to send a message and how she's kind of leading this group as we see in
And
the first issue?
I agree that I feel like her motivations or her plot or whatever is a little inconsistent, because in this part I feel like, oh, they're wanting to essentially enslave or use humans as like more or less cattle for the vampires. And later on that does turn into just, let's just end it, like tear it all down. But this part, I mean, of course, just setting the whole part of using Jupiter to send a very clear and distinct message that the terrorists from the first volume are still around.
Yeah.
And they're not going away, and they're coming out a little more forceful and strong. But I mean, again, like the art, just talking about her, just like this panel here alone, I feel like it's really strong. I mean, it's just a close up of her face, but with the way the eyes of the vampires are always done so cool in this, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and she's clearly, very intense. What about you, Justin? Do you have anything to add to this little at the end?
I mean, totally agree with you guys. I think that I'm from this issue specifically, I like the moment where her and Toppy are talking, and she's like, I assume you have a plan of action. And Toppy says, yeah, we kill them all every night, run raids until every man, woman, and child is dead and rotting in the earth. And the way she just like sips her wine, and she's like, and while they rot, what would we do for blood? Like, you idiot. And like, and he just like, it's just like, it just shows him like kind of look off to the side. It just kind of shows like, at least in that moment, because I agree, later it does get a little confusing with what she ends up wanting to do. But in that moment there, I mean, she makes a very valid point, and more so, I think to set the stage for everyone at that table with her to put Toppy in his place, essentially, right. To say, hey, you keep being a soldier. And don't worry about what we're doing. Let me handle the big picture.
And I do think for me that's part of why this volume ended up not working, was because this initial setup of her and how she was going to lead was so strong.
Yeah.
But then I felt like she lost the thread, like later in the thing. It's like she's this commanding presence, and then later it's like, we're just going to go out and kill everybody, It's like she was going to use Jupiter as a targeted weapon, and she was going to do these steps, and then it was just like, we're just going to burn it down. And I felt like that was where it like sort of fell apart to me, because I don't feel like her as a character would lose the thread of what her plan was, but I felt like the story did.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
I mean, I will say towards the end, when she does have her like that plan flip, a lot happens in that moment, and it's almost like she's lashing out in anger later on.
Yeah.
After some things fall apart.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we'll move into issue 8. And John, you said that it was maybe your favorite issue of the series, so I'm going to let you lead off issue 8.
I freaking love this issue. Yes. Art, amazing. Absolutely one of the best drawn issues. And then James Sangster C. Sr. This is like beautiful. His journey across the river Styx through hell to his wife, only to have the rug yanked out from under him. Like, this whole bit, like I get like misty-eyed reading it when he realizes she's right there, and they have that panel with the tear on his face, and I'm like, oh my God. And then of course we know what Junior's doing, and we're like, this is not gonna go well. And then of course the final panel when he's like, this better be really fucking important. Like, holy shit, man, I just got there, The whole journey of James Sr. in this sequence is one of my favorites. And it ultimately is a driving force for a lot of what he chooses to do or not do going forward, coming out of this sequence. Really just top notch across the whole thing for me. Also, I'm an X-Files fan. I don't know if anybody else noticed the X-Files, but Mulder and Scully are in this issue. So if you want to blow me up, here, I don't mind helping out with this.
You got it already. Yeah.
Yeah. Right there. That's Scully and Mulder right there. Right there. Yeah. They go to the crime scene and the FBI is already there. And there's Scully and Mulder in the background. And then their boss, Skinner, is right there too. And he ends up talking to him.
Yeah.
Skinner, the head of the FBI, is the head of the FBI. The X-Files are there, gang. So this takes place in the X-Files universe, folks. I just want you to know this. I want you to feel the Rodney Barnes crossover glory of this issue and just know it and feel it.
Does he have any ties to the X-Files in any way? Like,
I no, nothing at all. Also, great artwork for Abigail.
Yes, I like
short skirts and red.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I figured that was the panel you were gonna show.
Amazing.
Love that one. Yeah.
Gore, you don't need convincing, but yeah, they don't say a single line. It's just like 3 panels, but it's worth it for fans like you and I. Gore, absolutely amazing. So yeah, that's what I love about this issue. I think the story stuff works, the fun little like pop culture stuff works for me, and then yeah, I like the artwork, the use of the color red all the way through. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. So yeah, we're getting 2 paths. We're getting to see Junior getting more desperate as Abigail starts putting her plan in place, and Senior trying to, at least mentally, even though he's like, and this is where this book does get a little weird, and like what these vampires could do when they're dead and they're not dead, and how their consciousness works. Like, gets a little off the rails because he's really just sitting in his coffin, but mentally he's like going to the land of the dead, and like, and I mean, you see it coming. Justin, what did you think of this issue, and what stood out to you about this one?
Well, so I recall just from the first time reading this through, and this is the issue where we get the dad back, because I mean, up until now I just wasn't sure, like, you know, is he going to come back? Is that a character that's
he's gone for a whole issue?
And I know he's only one issue. I know, but like I was like, all right, cool, like we're gonna see that, and like John said, like it was in a whole different universe, essentially being in hell, and having just like these unique. I mean, obviously you can make it up as you go, however you want. So the creepy guy who like takes him over the boat and everything else. I love that we see Mayor Gaskin burning, and he's like, is that Mayor? Can we help him? And he's like, no, unfortunately, just keep going. So I like that we got to see, you know, just some other little pieces connect in that way. And then, I mean, like John said, the artwork was it's so good, especially down in the when he is like in hell, those scenes. And sorry, John, but I never really got into X-Files, so I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know who those people are. X-Men. I know X-Men. I don't know.
What about you, Carol? What did you think of this one? This issue and the how we're setting up, how we're getting James Sr. back, and his journey and Junior's journey as we go through this issue.
I do think this was probably the strongest issue of the whole book, honestly, because of all this like afterlife stuff, just the dialogue between Sangster and what was the boat driver's name?
Chiron.
Yeah.
That's how I've always pronounced it. I don't know if that's actually
Chiron. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's actually the proper pronunciation, but yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, so the dialogue between the two it's perfect, where he's just like, you're neither alive nor dead. Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I want to go across the river. Could you take me? He's like, I don't know. I've never really dealt with one like you before. It's like, I guess we could try, you know. But all of that I thought was excellent. Yeah, seeing the mayor burning was interesting. Of course, we see the mayor again later on, even.
So I want to talk about this for a second. Because he does see Chiron talk about never had to deal with one of you before. And later, when we meet the devil, he says a similar thing. And yet it's clear they've been in this world for a while. So how is it that they've never dealt with them before? Like,
I guess none have tried to like.
Why they were so
those vampires are just
alive,
happy to be like alive.
Yeah.
And none of them have tried to like dip into
I just found that a little jarring. I don't know. Did anybody else like feel like that was like odd that they didn't know what to do with them? Like, in this form, or what? I mean, did that stand out to anybody else? Apparently not.
No.
I just looked at it as like where we are in this story, in this history of vampires, it's the first time it's happened. So every other vampire before has just been content to be a vampire. Although later,
vampire or be dead or be destroyed and just be dead
and just be done. Now, like
yeah,
what
I
happens
just
when
found
they
it
are
odd
just?
that it was like they apparently, because there's like Sangster just has this ability, and Tevin, who had the book, has the ability, and then John's kind of like just floating around, and it's
He's like in a limbo sort of.
yeah, they're like all of them are kind of like dead but not dead, and like how are these just the only ones that's ever? I don't know. It struck me as odd. Apparently, I was the only one that struck it.
But I want to know who was the rapper supposed? Is that supposed to be Drake?
Probably. I did think of Drake. Yeah,
I did too. But
yeah, I mean that's kind of who I was like. Is this Drake? So
yeah. He's got like the facial hair and everything.
It sure kind of resembles Drake, I would say. Yeah. So
that's a pretty bold statement, though, to do it on like a live stage in front of thousands of people. It's like how else do you like? So you can't be like, oh, it's just terrorists again.
Right.
We walked up and like ate him in front of everybody.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, Jupiter does not hold back on the violence at all. So
nope.
And doesn't really hold back on willing to do it to everybody. Anything else on issue 8 before we keep moving?
I just love the imagery of the boat crossing over, and of course that panel in pink of the tear going down Senior's face. I just love that slays me. He's not from the X-Files. With Drake, is he from the X-Files? But there's a great use of color, I think, in this issue. The color work is very different than the other issues. There's some really cool bits, and I think, again, shout out to Jason, Sean, Alexander. I knew it was 3 names. I was trying to get them all. He really does a great job of highlighting the horror or the beauty or the tragedy. I think he is absolutely slaying.
Yep.
It reminds me of, have you ever seen, I think the name of the movie was What Dreams May Come?
Yeah.
There's a Robin Williams movie and had that rotoscoping painting when he was, I think he was in the afterlife. Years.
Yep. He is.
That's what it reminded me of.
Totally. Well said.
Well,
Cuba Gooding
I will
Jr.
say, you comment on the artist, Jason John Alexander, but you also commented on the colors. So Louis NCT, I don't know how you would pronounce his last name, but Nick, how you would say that, but like is the colorist on this. And you're right, he does take a very different tone in this issue than we see him take in the rest of it. So,
but it changes as the issue goes on too.
Yeah, like the meadows, like the purple flowers and the blues and stuff like that.
As he gets closer to her, it definitely changes,
lightens up more. By the way, I like at the end when he digs up his dad again, and his dad's just like, "This better be really fucking important."
Because the last time he dug him up, he said, "What took you so long?"
Yeah, he wanted him.
He's always taking shots at his kid.
Yeah,
in these moments,
it's like he's always messing things up.
He can't let it go. Yeah, that's the father-son baggage, and these characters are going to always have.
So we move into issue 9, and we get another flashback. We get a little more on basically, obviously we get the Sangsters, and Dad is not happy with Son. And he's like, "What? You were just lying in the coffin?" And he's like, "Yeah,
laying in the coffin."
But we get more on Jupiter here and how he came to be with Abigail, and that and I love how she talks about like a couple times that there's multiple times in here she talks about that she thought about just like ending John all through the years, like. She couldn't do it, but she considered it.
My wife thought the same thing many times.
So what stands out to you, anybody, about issue 9 here is they start working the case and we get more background on Jupiter, and we see that maybe there's another president we're going to see at some point in here. like the ultimate fate of Jefferson. What did you guys think of this issue?
Filler setup. Sorry.
Let's
No, it's my least favorite issue, and it does feel like a filler setup exposition dump, and that's why I think it's a slog. This issue, it's kind of frustrating. Sorry, I just had to say that.
Well, I like the stuff about Jupiter in it, and I mean, it's very visceral. And,
Right.
The stuff with Jefferson though did leave me kind of going like, so is he a vampire just locked away somewhere? Because they left that kind of open-ended.
At least so far. I feel like that's definitely where this is going for me, and I don't know that I need it.
Is it going to turn out that
JP is going to be very disappointed going forward?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it can't be good. I'm just saying, like, I don't know that I need John's biggest rival to now be the vampire in the story. Like, that they both ended up vampires. Like,
and I'm saying, we're still in phase. We're still in the first hardcover, my man.
Well, I know.
I'm saying
and I get it early. My point is, I'm not saying it couldn't work, but when they went there, I was like, I don't know.
I'm trying to temper your expectations because this is Hamilton with vampires. This is not the last founding father you're going to have this.
Oh, I'm probably not. No.
Just buckle up for the long haul.
and if they can make it work, then that's fine. For me, I was
that's the bigger challenge, right? Does it work is the bigger challenge.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what about you, Justin? What did you take out of this? Because for me, I think it really was just the Jupiter stuff. The rest of it was even the father-son. See, like the father-son bickering through this whole thing, which I get dad is mad.
Right.
And he has every right to be mad. But I did feel like that was a huge step back in their relationship from what we got in volume 1.
Yeah.
Justin, what about you? What did you think of either Jupiter or the father-son dynamic here?
No, totally. I agree with the father-son dynamic. I mean, I think it's still just as a reminder that, things can't necessarily all just be, patched up so easily. And that this is a little bit more of the reality of what they were like, kind of going back and forth in a lot of it. I do like that a lot of it is more of he's just so frustrated because he wants to get back, to where he was in hell, essentially, and seeing his wife. One thing to note, I do like that. I agree. It's totally much more of a filler than I would have liked it to have been. But I do like they include like Brittany here. You get Brittany briefly talking to Abigail, mommy Abigail, she calls her. But she kind of just reiterates the plan a little bit more as to, the idea of what Abigail wants right now and the plan of, making them slaves essentially and kind of backing that part of the story up. And then I do like the back, the showing some of the scenes of like them as kids, like on the swing and stuff, like they're like the same, same age, like growing up and everything. Obviously it turned south, for Jupiter, but, overall, just, it's really more just a focus on Jupiter, I think, for the most part for this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have anything else there they want to mention in that issue? I don't feel like we're good. All right, so issue 10, we start and we get the start of Toppy's backstory. We get a big chunk of Toppy's backstory throughout issue 10. What did you think about his backstory in this? Daryl, I'll let you go first this time.
It was pretty interesting to place him in like kind of post the Civil War as like a freed slave that earned his freedom by being a Confederate marksman, which it's an interesting take. But they make him so competent in that era that when you see him as a vampire, where he's pretty much always either being put in his place by Abigail or by Tev or whoever, it's like you're like, where is this badass from the Wild West?
Yeah,
it's like we don't see him being the vampire like that. We just see him in life being like that.
Yep.
So I thought that was a little awkward, but his backstory was pretty neat.
No, I agree with you because he and even in the very next issue, he just gets his butt whooped by everybody throughout this. Yeah. But then they're telling this backstory and he should be this complete badass killer. And it's
Yeah.
like, Justin, what did you think of Toppy's backstory and the inconsistency here?
I totally agree. That to me, I'm expecting a lot more, and especially in this issue, I thought that because of this built-up backstory, that we were going to get more of a win for Toppy, essentially, and I don't think we ever really get that. I will say, love the artwork. I have to show this panel or this page, I guess I should say. Yeah, I mean, it's so well done. Yeah, John.
Dude,
John's
we know what
I don't know what you
Justin's
like about that.
Yeah, it's just so well done.
Just something
I
stands out about
actually
it.
I expected John to show that panel.
Oh, okay.
I am impressed, but
I just didn't give him a chance yet.
yeah, Justin got there first.
So proud.
So, John, what do you think of Toppy's backstory? Before we get to the other stuff in this issue, what do you think of his backstory?
I certainly love the American history stuff that they're throwing in there. The town of Deadwood, and obviously the Civil War, and perspectives on Abraham Lincoln and the freeing of the slaves. And so I definitely liked all that stuff. I always thought of Toppy as a fairly impotent character, as kind of like he's the like epitome of impotent rage.
Right.
And yeah, he was a sniper, but I didn't think that sequence makes him seem particularly amazing. Like I didn't view him as like,
I don't know. It made him seem
impressive.
competent, and he doesn't seem competent.
I suppose, but I don't. It didn't seem like anything that felt out of character. I always viewed him as just basically like impotent rage incarnate. Like that's just his failing, is that he doesn't have a lot more than just his anger to live by.
Okay.
So I always thought he was a character that looked cool and just wasn't.
Okay.
But yeah, not a great second issue as well. Not one of my favorites.
So the other things that are going on here, we get Junior screwing up, and we see Dad's frustration with that.
Right.
And yeah, this is the issue, I think, where I felt like the father-son dynamic kind of fell apart for me, because Junior does come across as incompetent here. Like literally, what did you guys think of this? Or Justin, I'll let you go first this time. I don't remember who's turned.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was it's frustrating when it comes down to the fact that he forgets the stakes in the car.
When they're going to fight vampires.
Yes, when you're exactly like your whole mission here and being aware of what's around you, and you leave them in the car. So that's kind of what I was getting at in the beginning, where I'm like, he's just, he's clearly, even though he wants to kind of step up and play the role in which his dad used to be, he clearly is not fully there yet, just in terms of experience and knowing what to do. And obviously one of the reasons why he even dug his dad back up was because he just wasn't sure where to go from here. He's got doubts himself on the mission at hand, and because of that, the other guy dies. Who's it? The lieutenant gets pulled in, which pretty wicked scene, seeing all these hands kind of grab him as he's trying to escape the explosion before that goes out. I thought that was pretty heavy. There's the him kind of dashing forward there.
Yeah, it's got some like pretty good horror.
Yeah.
Kind of trope of like being pulled back into the room.
Right. Meanwhile, his hands just reaching out. Yeah.
All right, Daryl, what did you think of father son here and son screwing up?
I agree that it's kind of frustrating to see this character that we already read one volume of kind of growing up and seeming pretty competent in that first volume. In this volume, he just, it's like he has to dig Dad back up, and then he forgets the stakes, and it's like the character in general seems to have regressed a little bit, which is frustrating from that perspective. I do like this part though with the dad, when the dad yells at him and tells him to grow up, and it's like, it's like he's jumping out of his body.
Like, the art there is really well done.
So the dad is pretty cool. I like the dad. I'm glad the dad is back, because he is much more interesting than the son.
Like the dad's a stronger character than the son, but I feel like part of that is in order to make the dad cool, like the son has suffered in the storytelling here in this volume, and I like that's where it just, some of that just did, the inconsistency there just was like, okay, I thought we were building up the son in the first volume, and then we're like, no, we decided we don't like the son as much as we like the dad, so we're gonna change the storytelling here. I mean, that's the way it's reading to me, John. What do you? Am I off base here? What do you?
No, I don't think you're off base. No, that's fairly accurate. I definitely agree. And I think the issue with the story that we discussed in the first volume was the concept that this is not a terribly original father-son take. Like this is, this is fairly straightforward, well-trod ground in literature, movies, whatever. And I think the purpose for that is a grounding element to a fairly supernatural and buck wild story needed. It maybe the writer probably feels it needs that grounding element. And there's times when it clicks and times when it doesn't, to a lesser or greater extent. This particular portion, issues 9 and 10 specifically, don't work as well as some of the others for me. Totally agree. I do like 11 better. I like the sequences we get with the father son in 11 better than the ones we get in 10.
Okay, so issue 10 then swings the final page. It's this huge that like I don't feel like they set this up well enough. Like Jupiter suddenly decides, nope, Abigail's not my master anymore. I'm killing everybody.
Yep. This wasn't the issue for that.
I feel like this is too. We didn't get enough to see to get him to where he was going to betray her after he was just doing everything she said. Like,
I agree.
Obviously, this leads into the big part of what 11 is. Or John, I'll let you go. You haven't went first for a while. What did you think of like that last page and Jupiter suddenly being like, "No, I'm going to kill everybody"?
I think it's hard to gauge Jupiter's state of mind because we don't get a ton of his thought process. We don't get a ton of his thinking. We get his actions and we see what he does. We see people commanding him and we see how he responds. And we got a sense of who he was when he was immortal.
Right.
But the vampire version that's been alive for a couple hundred years or whatever, 100 years plus, we don't necessarily have his thinking. We can only gauge by his actions. And I definitely see a very conflicted character. So this didn't seem like a shocking twist for me. But it definitely wasn't like set up where we were in his mind and seeing his thought process all the way through.
No. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I didn't think that this was going to happen as soon as it did. I mean, I was even as a second or third time through thinking that, or knowing that this was going to happen. I thought it was actually just later in I don't know, either at the end of the series or going into the next. But I do feel like it was a bit more. And also, we're tied in still with learning more about Toppy. So getting that at the end of this issue also I was more focused on Toppy. Like I'm going back for a second, but I wanted to point out the point where when Toppy finds out about his family dying, I loved how they showed it with the green scarf tied around the guy's leg, showing that same green scarf was the one that his wife was wearing when they showed this really nice like family picture after they had just got done killing a bunch of people on trying to survive essentially. Anyways, I felt so wrapped up in this story of Toppy and learning more about his history that I kind of felt it was almost jarring to like go right back into what's going on with what's his name, Jupiter, on the very last page. I don't know. I almost felt like it just didn't seem like it would be part of this issue for whatever reason. I don't know. I guess again, these last like 5 pages before that was all Toppy, right? I mean, everything here was Toppy. Before that. So I don't know. Yeah, it did seem a bit out of left field for where this was, that we didn't get enough other information prior.
Yeah, it was not a Jupiter issue. Like,
right.
If we'd been getting Jupiter backstory instead of Toppy backstory, maybe that sets it up better.
I would have thought this should have ended with a current wherever Toppy was right now, like a current.
Yeah. It's almost go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it wasn't. Yeah.
It's almost like this issue and the previous issue almost should have been flip flopped in a way. but yeah, even still, it's like Toppy is. You're just getting his backstory like randomly, and it's interesting, but it's like it doesn't seem relevant to the current happening of the present day part of the story.
Right.
But I will say, I do want to point out this one panel too, where they're like coming out of the coffins.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just struck me funny.
The way
They know his
the way
name.
his hands are like this.
They're like, hey, we heard about you and we showed up. We want to convert you to our terrorist.
Come here, you bring it in.
So that does bring us to the start of issue 11. And this is my biggest issue with this volume. We have not seen Tevin since he killed John Adams. And now he's working to resurrect him. What the what? There is no setup here to his motivation, and there's no real setup to why he thinks John is going to be any different than he was before. As we start into this, we get John as like in some sort of purgatory, like his mind's still there, even though his body was destroyed, and Tevin's just like, "Sup, John?" Like, what? Defend this, John.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about John Adams. Now you're talking about me.
Sure.
Defend the writer choice of bringing John Adams back.
The writer choice of having Tevin disappear for 4 issues, 7, 8, 9, 10, no Tevin, no mental process of where he went from we got to kill John Adams to now I'm gonna go redeem John Adams. He just disappeared for 4 issues,
Right.
and then we get this. Like,
And you're having trouble connecting the dots.
yeah, I'm having trouble connecting the dots.
For me, it's the, and I guess I don't need to pull Game of Thrones in again. It's the concept of it's easier to win a war than it is to rule, right? And in this case, I think that's been true of several of our characters, and it's very true of Tev. Is it Tev? Sorry,
I think it's Tevin.
Tevin.
Tevin. I think
Seesaw.
I
He's been
think-
called that twice in 2 volumes.
he set up Abigail's rise, and now he's spent 3 issues of the comic watching her.
But we don't see him watching her.
I know, but he has, like,
Right.
watching the revolution that he caused, watching the mayor getting killed, watching the rapper get murdered on live television, watching the city of Philadelphia start to descend into what it's becoming. And I think he's having regret.
Right. And I can get that, but we don't see him. To me, we need to have seen him like he needs to have been a thread through here.
Okay,
Like, even if he was interacting with Junior and Dad or something, like,
I agree. I feel that it would have saved it a little bit if they showed him even just once in like the first issue for a couple panels to just show in the meanwhile here's John Adams stuck and sad,
the Claremont
and
style of like I need one page,
kind of, yeah, but like kind of because it is John. JP, you make a good point. The fact that the last time we saw this guy was when Tevin was killing him and trying to defeat him from his evil plan, and now the next time we see him is literally the complete opposite. And I just feel like the fact that there's nothing in the middle. It is weird. It is jarring. It is out of place. And I feel like if they at least gave us something to show, at least like, by the way, where's John Adams right now? Like, oh, he's here, like moping and walking around. I don't know. At least would have connected the dots. Like, okay, time is passing, and he's alive. Like, not alive. He's like he's somewhere. And now they bring this other part in. I don't know. I thought that was weird. The other thing too. Why did he go back to looking like this? What made that happen?
Because it's just like a mental, like he's communicating with his spirit because the body's destroyed. Like,
so that's Spirit John right there.
I guess, but that goes back to the whole thing of they haven't dealt with, like, he's in purgatory and nobody's dealt with dead vampires before. It's like, are they really even dead? And it's like, I don't know. It just brings up a lot of weird questions for me. Daryl, what did you think about Tevin suddenly wanting to save John and bring him back?
I do agree that it kind of just comes out of nowhere without any build up. With this many issues into the book, I do think that John is dead though,
right?
Because he is in this purgatory and he cannot get out. Unlike Singster Dad, who obviously could just be dug up and he was like, "Oh, I'm awake," like you open the tomb and here I am.
Right.
But at some point too, though, where Abigail is talking about, I thought about leaving John in his tomb. I guess that's later in the same issue.
Yeah, it's in here when we get the her and Sally part.
Yeah. So anyway, there must be something where they can just like go in like a tomb or a grave and just, I don't know, like recuperate for a long time or something.
Yeah.
I guess. And at some point he just decided, he's like, we're just going to stay in here for a while, or I am. And Abigail was still out. So it's all kind of like nebulous in a way of how they're handling it. But I think maybe he's in this form, Justin, because he's like in a mental state of going back to how he was before he became a vampire.
Before he turned,
yeah. So I think that's why he goes back. And as John pointed out at the beginning of this whole episode, he has all this baggage from this point in his life.
So it's just kind of stuck in his head.
Yes, and that's his purgatory, is to go back there and relive his cusp of relevance to irrelevance.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that we have that's the through line in here is as Jupiter is tearing through the ranks here, we get the violence of him attacking, and Abigail seeing him come forward, and we see Toppy, who we just got this backstory for, be completely useless.
He gets his arm ripped apart.
And we see Abigail go, she's like, "Oh, if this is my end, I prefer reflecting on better times, happy in love." And no, it's not with John, it's with Sally Hemings. Which, to me, like, talk about like, if anybody in this whole book that we're going to get, I assume we're going to get Sally at some point, deserves to be angry. Like, she was used in life by Jefferson and she was used in death by Abigail, and both of them just like, yeah, and Abigail just cast her aside when she's done. Well, you're not as useful to me as John is, so see ya. Like, Justin,
I was being very happy at first.
Or Daryl, go ahead. Yeah. So what do you think of the Sally Hemings thing here?
Well, I mean, I know of Sally Hemings. I didn't know about Jupiter, but I did know about Sally Hemings.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting that, like, see another like real historical figure. I thought it was odd though that I was like, so Abigail is basically taking all of Jefferson's slaves and converting them into vampires to be not really slaves of hers, but she is kind of using them in a way. It's like it was all kind of hypocritical in a lot of ways. But they paint Sally at first when she's alive as like kind of happy. She's like, "Oh, I'm looking at the stars. It's a beautiful night, warm weather and stuff." The relationship aspect of it seemed, I don't know, it was odd. Like,
yeah, this was an interesting choice to.
I suppose she comes back with Thomas later on, huh?
But yeah, it was just, well, no, when she says that the night that they met and she turned her was the night Jupiter went back to kill him and found him like on his deathbed. So like the other vampires. So that's the same night. So she didn't turn her until after Jefferson was whatever he becomes. So, or at least that's the way I read the timing on that. Because it says, with John taking an extended sabbatical and Jupiter witnessing his master's demise at a moment to ponder the future and like a gift from the universe, and then that's when she found Sally. So it's like that same time frame or whatever. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of, I don't know, that was not, again, an unexpected choice, but not a bad one. It was just a different one. John, what did you think about these two?
It was hot as heck. What are you talking about? No, it was definitely a twist.
Stopping scenes.
I think it was a fun twist. It certainly worked for me within the context of the journey that we're seeing Abigail go on. I totally agree. She's being a massive hypocrite, Daryl, and I think it's a big part of her character flaw that in the comics here is this unwillingness to see her own actions with the same clarity that she seems to feel like she sees John's actions. And it's part of the beauty, I think, of the piece is it's never trying to say that one founding father or one hero character or one villain is all in the right or all in the wrong. There's a ton of characters and they're all screwing things up and they're all carrying their baggage and they're all trying to figure out the solution to this problem of the current state of things, the relationship to the origin of things. And there's no simple right answer. There's no simple fix. There's no simple solution, right? It's going to take a ton of people all trying to fix this, all trying to put the best interests at stake and not necessarily their own best wishes, whatever they want, their own baggage and their own crap. And I think, you looked at John trying to be like, well, I need to live up to what my epic failure of a presidency was. And still carrying that stupid baggage all the way into watching Hamilton on Broadway. I think, I find there's hilarity in that. It's a humanity in that. And I think it's the same with Sally or with Abigail. And I think all the characters are struggling with this. Like, how do we fix this? It's such a mess. How do we fix this? And I like that there's no clear-cut solution because there isn't.
So we do get a little bit of better father-son time, but just for time for us, I'm going to skip to, we get to the end of the thing, and we've seen Jupiter just tear through anybody that stood in his way until he gets to Abigail, and she wipes the floor with him. Like, what did you guys think of? Which I love that, at least in the hardcover, it's like she wipes the floor with him. He's like, "You never loved me," and she's like, "You're right." And then this is this whole let's take to the streets. Like, we're just gonna burn it down, like, which seems to me like a drop from her plan. But you do get this amazing spread for the next issue at the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's a great one. I think that what Daryl said in the beginning of our stream here makes sense to why she just immediately switches and says, "Let's take to the streets." Is that she's like so like frazzled with what had just happened, enough to where she's even dreaming back to or daydreaming back to like a happier time for that very moment before she ultimately might think that she even dies. Her anger that's been built up throughout this whole time, I think is what kind of made her shift gears in wanting to say, screw it. Let's just go wreak havoc here, at least just within this night. I think it was a little bit uncontrollable, right, for her, for what she had gone through. And like I said, like those fight scenes, like I love how she says no. And it's just like, no, period. Like she just says no when she grabs him by the neck and just destroys him. Very heavy scene for her to like kind of be able to just turn around like that. And then meanwhile, he gets completely owned. But I don't know. I am of mixed feelings between the two of how she says that. Like you're pointing out, JP, her wanting to just take the streets. It is a little out of, off, but I think that with tying in consideration for her emotions at that time, I think it kind of explains a little bit, at least in the moment, you know.
John, what about you?
I think Abigail is as much a victim of her ego as any of these characters, and feeling like no, I've got the answer to fix all of this, and having it blow up in her face, is apropos of these characters and of this universe. So she has power. She has a lot of these characters have power, have the opportunity to make change, but don't necessarily have the answer to what that change is and how to actually make something that's going to be fundamentally better than the situation everybody's in.
Yeah. Daryl, you have anything to add to that?
No, not really on the end of that issue. I mean, there was some pretty good stuff with Tevin and his grandmother in that issue, but
there is some pretty good stuff that I kind of skimmed over. Like, because we do see him kind of go after he leaves John, he goes, and again, how he just can visit the spirit realm. Of course, he has the book, so so that explains all. He has unlimited powers, but like to visit his dead grandmother and like kind of talk through, you get a little bit of his motivation of what he's trying to do, because his whole thing in killing John was he was trying to make it better. But again, I just feel like there should have been some more of him realizing that he hadn't before we jump to that. But which jumps us into issue 12, and he leaves Grandma. Like we see Abigail terrorizing the streets. We see him leave his grandmother, and he travels to hell to get the power to bring John back. That he needs more power. Yes, that panel.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that panel.
That was the most over the top to me.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And
you say that like it's a bad thing, Daryl.
Well,
for me, like I don't
right
over the top, like the over the top violence doesn't work for me generally. Like I get it, it's horror, that's what it is, but that's part of the thing that I don't like about horror is I don't care for that love that kind of thing. But
a lot of it really so far has just been like slashing,
right?
Like, you see like a mouth with like a red streak, but that panel it's just like she has a child hanging from her mouth like she's like a dog or something carrying a bone.
Yeah, that one's a lot for sure.
Yeah.
So, but we see Tevin go visit the devil and basically, or Corzone is what they call
Corson.
call him here. And he's like, why would I do this? He's like, because we're doing your work for you. We're sending you people. Like
that panel.
What did you think of the design of hell and the devil in this one here? Daryl, we'll let you go first this time.
I liked all of the hell stuff. I thought the demons looked awesome. Like this thing.
The pigs, like the upside down.
And it's like an upside down skull is their mouth, and like just even this thing in general. It's like, what is it?
Yeah.
Well, I got a lot of like Sandman vibes.
It totally Sandman. That's what I was thinking. Totally Sandman vibes.
I definitely got that, which is probably why I liked it.
Yeah.
But I liked all that, and I thought the devil character was, pretty on point for a devil creature. But I liked the dialogue between them all was like pretty good. When it's like definitely I like when there's a character standing up to the devil in that way.
Totally, yeah.
Like, oh, sure, I'll do this for you, but you will give me your soul. Like, no, I won't.
It's a very Constantine moment.
Yeah, very, very.
What's up, Perry?
John, what do you think about the devil here and Tevin's deal or no deal here with the devil? Like, what do you think?
I think it's another great art sequence from Jason Sean Alexander and the colorist Luis NGC. But I also think story wise, it's a wonderful sequence to showcase Tevin as a very intelligent character and a character who can outwit a lot of other characters, but also he is just as foibled and flawed as many of our other characters in that he doesn't know what to do to solve the problem. He just knows he needs a lot of people working together and to somehow figure out a way to make people team up to solve this.
Justin?
I'm gonna have nightmares from this.
When we get to Jupiter, yeah.
Just saying.
Well, and they're like he.
Yeah, the he
all the way down the
that's
stairs.
terrifying.
Yeah. Very Joker-esque.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of like the whole atmosphere as Daryl's winning out with Hell. I thought that was fantastic. I love the concept of it in general because you really could just do whatever you want. I mean, that's what same with Sandman. Like it just totally was Sandman vibes the way you guys were pointing that out before. The panels, the artwork here just it's so good. And that scene with Jupiter there, really creepy.
Yeah. So that is part of like, and we kind of skimmed over it in the last issue and in this issue is we see father and son kind of get back on the same page again, kind of start to rebuild where they're at and how they're getting along, only for as we get to the end here, we get son getting bitten.
Crazy. Yeah.
You get a vampire, and you get a vampire, and everybody gets a vampire.
Now everybody's going to be a vampire, yes. And Abigail, like, oh, good evening. Now he's going to be one of us. You should thank me. Being very, over the top, arrogant, only to get her come up. Yeah,
there's your girl, John.
Way to die.
Yeah.
Only to get her come up a little bit, maybe, as we see she is not ready to see that guy back. Kevin's plan works, and we now have John back, which means the whole first volume of Kill John Adams was for what?
It was a wash. I love how John Adams is dressed back in the red polo, the nice blazer over the top. He's got the scruff. Yeah, a little scruff under the chin there. Like that's the John Adams.
Every comic book needs more John. JP, come on.
I don't know. I just feel like the story takes these steps forward and then it takes steps backwards. That like. Why did we need more John? Well, I'm sure we'll figure it out. I'm sure there's more to it. But it was just like, I don't know, the whole thing with Tevin and bringing back John and John being like, yes, I'll do it better this time. It's like, why would you believe that if you're Tevin? And the whole thing just like, I don't know. It just didn't, like this whole reveal at the end, I'm like, didn't make me go, oh boy, I want to read the next issue. So he's back. What did you guys think of how this ends? Who wants to go first? I don't know who's.
I will say I did feel that I wanted to read on after this, and I actually forgot that it ended this way, and I'm like, oh man, this is how we end things because I wanted to know more with the son now that he's bit. Like obviously that changes a ton. Not so much the John Adams stuff. Yes, that last page wasn't necessarily the gotta keep going for that reason per se, but with Junior being turned essentially or bitten, that whole ordeal here at the end of the issue or end of the series, I should say, or the trade, that to me was like, okay, like damn, I feel like this was just the halfway point almost to that next step. By the way, that the one thing I loved about that last panel that you were showing I love the perspective here of the close face, just taking a moment to look at the artwork with this, like so well done with the detail and everything else, and just I guess
her eyeball. Holy crap!
Yeah. You still love her now, John? What's on?
I mean, we're still worth it.
All right.
Daryl, what about you? What did you think of this the return of John?
Well, since it was building up to it, it wasn't so much.
We knew it was coming.
I think the the biting of Sangster Jr. was that was a surprise. And ending on this, because the last book did end like it ended in a neat way that really you could have just read that first one and not kept going if you wanted to. But this one ends on such a cliffhanger with both Junior being bit and John being back. You want to hear, like, I do want to know their conversation, Abigail and John, you know, and I want to know what happens with Junior. So it doesn't. This one ends so much more abruptly than the other one did. It doesn't end with a nice time, which, I mean, that's episodic storytelling. You know, if it's an ongoing series, you want to keep reading. So
before I go to you, John, I will say, because you brought up the episodic storytelling, I do feel like it almost feels a little bit like some of the things that we did here that kind of took steps backwards. I think it feels like we're going to tell volume 1, and then they were like, oh, people like this, and then they twisted the ending just enough, and then they kept going. Like, that this was, because I do feel like you could have wrapped it up after volume 1. Volume 1 could have been a story. Like, if they wanted to tell a story, and then they're like, oh, there's maybe more here, so, but we got to bring the father back if we're going to keep going, and we need John to come back if we're going to keep going, and we need to, like, you know, am I wrong in feeling that way? I don't know if that's how it was set up, if it was always going to be an ongoing, but it does feel that way a little bit to me. Sorry, I sidetracked you before you could talk about the end there, John, but just because you brought that up made me think about that. But
well, I mean, I can't answer that question, but it certainly is entirely possible given the state of modern comic books. I think that it's highly likely that the first story arc was written as it could be the only, or it could be an ongoing, you know, depending on the popularity. And obviously this was incredibly popular, so it was transformed into an ongoing. And in that way, you could argue that plot lines were stretched or ideas were extended that maybe either didn't need to be or felt like they were being stretched.
right.
For me, none of it bothered me. Like, I was in for more of it. I like the ideas that it's raising. I like the worlds that it was exploring. I like the genres that it played with, and the emotional notes that it played for me were all so strong. None of it. I was willing to let go of the cliches or whatever that were happening that might have distracted or detracted for other people. And there's a lot of booty. So I mean, I'm all for all of it.
There was less booty in this volume than there was in volume 1.
Justin found all the best ones.
All right. Final thoughts on this volume. John kind of just gave his, but anything else you want to add to that before we go to everybody else, John?
No, I think that ultimately that was it.
Okay. Daryl, final thoughts on this volume.
I mean, I kind of wrapped it up too when I said that the first volume could have ended. And that could be the case, that like they thought maybe this is all they were going to get, so they tried to wrap it up. You know, The Walking Dead was like that. If you've ever read The Walking Dead, the first like 6 issues tie up like very neatly. They do, like, if you watch the show, they tie up that whole Shane story like super fast. And then you watch the show and it's like drawn out and you're like, well, why was it like that? And if you hear Kirkman talk, he's like, well, I thought I was only going to get 6 issues. So it's like, it turned out to be a hit and we got to keep going. So he's like, I wish I had more time to develop that story. So, I mean, it may have been, he just was like, well, let's see if we can get 6 out and
go from there.
And I guess this is pretty successful. I hear people talk about it quite a bit. So I don't know if, you know, it's not on
going, so
still going. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not on the level of, like, you know, The Walking Dead breakout success, but I mean, I could see this being an option for some kind of show, you know, and turning out to be a big hit. So you never know.
Justin, final thoughts on this volume.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a series that is going to reach the horror fans and people who are just into, you know, the vampire side of things, the blood and everything else. I think is a big part of it. Again, I'm going to go back to the artwork. Is for me something that was like an automatic. I'm going to continue reading this regardless of kind of what happens here. I do think you guys shed some light on some things that I didn't particularly question my first couple times around. And so, you know, kind of reconsidering that, I feel like this particular Volume 2 was a little bit of a step down compared to what we had read in the first one. I think if I was like talking to someone brand new that hasn't read it yet, I would probably kind of preface it with that if I were to encourage them to read through. I will say, from what I can recall, reading into the third, I'm looking forward to doing the next one, reading into the next one with you guys. So yeah, I mean, I'm very much sold with a lot of these characters. I want to know more about them. I do like the relationships, the way things are building here. Obviously, want to know what happens to Jimmy at the end here, now that he's been, essentially bitten, and then kind of the back and forth with John, how that's going to go. So, and Tevin, just like his role as a whole, where that's going, and are they going to bring the devil back, all this other stuff, so yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing, you guys' thoughts on it while we read the next one.
And I will say Amazon at least doesn't have any listing for the second hardcover yet, although I know that they're deep into, I think, issue 30 or something now in actual issues. I know. So the second volume, which should go through issue 24, is not available as a hardcover.
Not yet. No, it is not. So
is there a third trade paperback?
Oh, there's like 10 trade paperbacks, because they do. They're only 5-6 issues each trade.
Like 5.
This was the trade. This is second trade paperback.
Yeah, this is only the second trade. Yeah.
Okay. My final thoughts are, like, despite like the flaws and it just being horror in general, which is like, I do really enjoy the concept. I do think it's a different concept. I think that the execution has been, particularly in this volume, I felt like was hit or miss for me, like in terms of the execution of the concept. I do think like they are compelling characters. I just feel like the arc here was a little bit just not quite on the level all the way through. Like, just like we talked about, like we get Toppy's backstory, but then it doesn't lead to anything here. And like, other than him getting his arm ripped off, and we get like, and then the Jupiter thing, like his turn isn't really well set up. And then Tevin disappearing and then coming back isn't, like, there's just some inconsistency, I feel like, in the flow of the storytelling in this volume. And then we get some, like, step backs in terms of character development. But it does, so I feel like I'm being overly negative. I blame that on watching this guy and John talk about comics on the book club, that I blame that on them. But it definitely, for me, was a step down from the first volume. So we'll see where it goes from here. I do think Abigail is a compelling character, but I need a little more from her in terms of, I feel like her storytelling, and just like everybody else's, was just a little inconsistent. So we'll see where it goes. But I want to thank everybody for hanging out. There was a little side story, but we're at an hour and 20 minutes. So unless you guys have something really you want to say about the little werewolf thing, we'll call it right here. If there's something you want to say, there was a little werewolf backup story. But yeah,
I'm good.
That's inked pages by Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Did Justin totally freeze on us?
I think he did.
Perfect freeze there, Justin.
Justin is frozen. So we're just going to put him big screen.
I thought for sure it'd be my internet that did that.
So,
nope.
And with that, we're gonna get out of there. Get out of here. Thank you, Gore. Thank you, Perry. Thank you, Climbing. Yeah, we just lost Justin. Comment Crank. Yeah, thank you all for hanging out with us tonight. Stepping Razor, all of you, appreciate you hanging out. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. And we will be back to talk more Killadelphia at some point, but maybe Black Hammer before we do Killadelphia with this group. So with that, we will see you guys next time. Later.